second. Now
We're live.
There we are.
Yay.
All right. Whew, we had some tech issues for this one.
Situation normal, all effed up.
Yeah, well, I mean, what? We have 2 witches and a vampire, so what could go wrong?
Everything.
All
Let's
the things.
some wood.
So, yes, I think we should probably just like let people roll in and such. But on this end, we crossed over 30,000 today, which is very exciting on our Kickstarter. So, thank you to all those of you who are being lovely backers and pledgers. And those of you who don't know, we're working on 2 shows. One is an episodic investigative show where we investigate ghosts, but also aliens and cryptids and fae and all of the things. And we always say, we're not sure that all of those things aren't the same thing, but still we will investigate any of it. And the other
side of labels.
What's that?
We allow for possibility outside and beyond labels.
Yes, always well said by Michelle Belanger. And then the other show is a long form show where we go down a fucking wild rabbit hole, starting. Oh,
rabbit hole.
Not that hole. So excited! Thank you, Sharon. And so we start with vampires. And then what? We don't want to give away spoilers, but we go on some wild side streams.
Well, we get into the same space where what's in a word, what's in a label, why do we use the labels that we do, and what's beyond that? Because, like, if you talk to a witch, there's a lot more to what witches and witchcraft is, and it's just witch is the handy word for this cluster of things a person does, and each person is going to identify differently and work with very different spirits. I know that's like a deep conversation I've had with Devin, your husband. So,
Devin's your husband?
Yeah. Yesterday was our 1-year anniversary.
Oh, congrats! That's so exciting. Yeah. I remember finding out about Devin through. I heard you were on a guest on his podcast.
Yes.
I mean. Warlocks, everybody rocks. Like they're all fantastic, amazing. I let you explain that at some point if you want to. But
yeah, I'm fond of them.
Yeah, polyamory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So how do we want to do this, since we're doing this live stream a little different because we're looping in multiple groups? So do we want to do a little like quick intro of everybody?
Okay.
Probably a quick intro, and
maybe
you, Matt.
How about Matt?
You go first.
Oh, okay.
You, Matt, go.
No pressure.
I'm Matt Auryn. I am a witch. I say an ex-professional psychic, but I'm still a psychic. I just don't offer that as my livelihood anymore because I write books now on how to do it for yourself. So I wrote a book, Psychic Witch. I wrote another book, Mastering Magic, that just came out like a year ago. And I'm working on book 3 and waiting on the edits for book 3.5. Which was Pisces Witch with Evo. So I jumped on that. I pretty much begged my editor for it because she's like, I don't know, because you've got all these other projects going, and I was like, I just give it to me. Pisces Witch is Psychic Witch, and like I just want to work with Evo. Like let me do a project with Evo. So I'm really excited about that one.
I was happy to get something into Capricorn Witch for that one too. So. And weren't there a couple of very fancy awards recently for you?
Yeah, so the latest one I got silver for Mastering Magic for Best Witchcraft Book of the Year. Tempest got gold, which she deserves. It's amazing. Hers was Visual Alchemy. I'm a huge fanboy of Tempest's work. Even though I'm very big on like, oh, don't call yourself a fan, like if you read my stuff, but then I turn around and I'm like, I'm such a fan of Tempest. But yeah, it's a huge honor. So I'm excited for that. I got gold for Psychic Witch, and I'm just waiting for my award for silver. So it's kind of cool that I got gold and silver.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
I'm Michelle Belanger. I am the author of the Psychic Vampire Codex and the Dictionary of Demons and a whole bunch of other books. You look up, you'll feel overwhelmed. And you might also know me from paranormal television like Paranormal State, Portals to Hell, Conjuring Kesha. And if you are a fan of Nox Arcana and weird goth music, you can voice from the album Blood of Angels.
Oh yeah. That's a throwback, huh?
Yep.
When did that come out?
2005.
Mm-hmm. But
Yeah,
there's some dope tracks on there.
Because of them, not on that album, but on the Winter's Night that I did, I have been on a Billboard top 10 list. 2 years ago. Their album Winter's Night made Billboard top 10 holiday albums in 2006 and 2007.
Fascinating. Hello, haven't missed one live as of yet. I'm very excited for the new show. Thank you, Karen.
She is the sweetest, and say hello to all the kitties because Karen has fostered some adorable ones and then did exactly what I would do, which was now they're permanent cats.
Keep them all. Yeah.
That's what we did this year. We rescued 2 cats that just kind of came to our house.
Yeah, I saw that poor baby. He's looking so much better now.
Oh yeah, and we were the most worried about him, not just health wise, but we thought he was the one that was going to be kind of a jerk with among the cats. But he ended up being the sweetest boy. Like he's very shy, very like.
It's funny how your
nice.
personality will change when you're no longer in pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did he have mange and?
So he came up to our doorstep and was obviously asking for help. He was missing an eye, and like had a really bad wound. So like we couldn't not take him to the vet, and we didn't want to put him down, because we're just a bunch of softies. So we went and we took him to the vet, and the vet fixed his eyes and got him all prepared to be a house cat. And I say we, but it was mostly Chaz. Chaz pretty much nursed him back to health. He's the only one in the house that can get medicine down a cat's mouth, so we let him do that instead
really
of
hard.
getting clawed up. So
yeah.
You introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Fen Alankus, and I'm host of Follow the Woo podcast. I'm also an eclectic witch. In this sphere, I'm a baby witch. I'm also a filmmaker and producing these 2 shows. So the 2 shows of which are being funded on Kickstarter right now, the post-production and basically like marketing and distribution and kind of the like final touches and some final filming too. We're pretty much good on filming, but all of that is kind of being wrapped up in this Kickstarter campaign. So please, if you haven't already, check out our Kickstarter. You can go to Kickstarter and type in New Blood. We're the only New Blood campaign there is. And there's all kinds of amazing rewards. We have like a magically imbued planchette for a Ouija board with like a secret sigil that we use for our rituals on it. We have
a special pledge where you get whiskers from my cats.
Yes, that's a very popular one. Every episode needs to feature a cat reference. Well, you can get Michelle Belanger's cat whiskers if you want to pledge.
I think Jax has plenty of cat whiskers. I know how many cats Jax lives with, including the one that Jax is married to, who's basically the queen of cats.
Yes. Hello, Redonda. How are you? Hi, Leanne.
Hello.
So, yes, so that is what is happening. We also have a whole pride tier that we're really excited about because our entire cast and crew are queer, which we're also really excited about. So you can pledge for that one. We have awesome perks. We really do. We've thought so hard about these rewards, and then we took all of the feedback that we got from people and made new bonus rewards. So we have those as well, and go pledge if you can, and if you can't pledge, that's okay.
Yeah, like there's
but-
some add-ons. So like if you pledge,
Yeah.
but there's like, you really want that t-shirt that's over there, you can like add that to your cart.
That is true. And also, if you can't pledge and money is tight, we totally understand. Capitalism is lame. So you can just share it with your people. That would be like amazing.
Talk about it, share the excitement if you're excited, and if you're not,
If you're not, I don't know why you're here.
I'm excited about it. When I saw it, I was like, yes. Because I used to super be into like paranormal TV and stuff when I was younger, but then I just kind of got sick of it because like it's all the same crap. And by crap, I mean like it's very Warren satanic panic influenced, where it's, you know, it's always demons,
Yeah.
you know. And then like I also like, I know that like I've talked to Michelle about this in private, but like I get so annoyed when they bring on like a psychic or a medium to an investigation and then just totally ignore them for like whatever a stupid machine is saying, like, or they think it's saying, you know. And like the mediums over there, like, well, yeah, no, I'm trying to, like, I've got contact, you know.
they're like, but sounds better.
Yeah. We are right there with you, and we've been talking about that like ad nauseum, I feel like, at this point. But yeah, I think that the goal is to really look at the paranormal through a feminist lens and to smush together the psychic with the tech devices. You know, we're not going to like eradicate them, but
No.
you know, just like have it be a little bit more balanced.
And also say a lens of alternate religion, alternate spirituality, because my big personal beef with most of the shows, even the ones that I've been involved in, is the vast majority of them default to a very Christianized Western European approach, where it's either the spirit is your dead grandma or it's a demon. There's no in between.
There's no other option. Yeah.
There is no nuance.
Yeah.
The idea that humans, that we have the ability, more than just the psychics, that there's some way that we would be able to communicate with spirits, that we could become allies and work with them, as opposed to just clearing them out or seeing them as adversarial, that they don't belong.
Yeah.
Taking a more animistic approach.
Mhm.
I think that we need more shows that model animism and spirit communication as like a healthy part of a person's life and practice, as something that's not out there and weird, but is just, of course people can talk to spirits. That's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, and that was one of the reasons I was really excited when I saw you were doing it, because like I know your level of like integrity and like just kind of your stance, your general stance on like spirits, and because that's another thing that really bothers me is like when people go in and either they antagonize to try to get some sort of reaction, or they just straight up bully. And a lot of that goes back to that sort of like Warren influence that I'm talking about, that kind of Christian, like, you know, let's exorcise these spirits out of this place. And it's like, you don't even know what spirit it is to begin with. So
Yeah.
It's either disaster tourism masquerading as ghost hunting, or it's ghost exploitation, like just straight up ghost exploitation. And none of those model a healthy approach to any of it. And yeah, when Fen reached out and was like, "Hey, I'd like to document this thing," and da 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 da, and I was like, "Well, that could get pretty deep. Are we okay with going that deep?"
And it really did. Holy shit.
Yeah.
And it's still going. But I think we're on like a good topic that we should roll with, which is that you know, we're talking about how you can bring in these practices into a paranormal investigation. And I think Matt, because we have you here, let's talk about like witchcraft in the paranormal, and like witchcraft in a paranormal investigation, and like, does it belong there? Does it not? I mean, obviously, spoiler alert, we all think it belongs there.
Well,
But
and particularly that like you can be a psychic and you can be a witch, that these are not mutually exclusive things. They can be part of the same path. And like, what does it look like when you are approaching psychic experiences and paranormal experiences beyond a Christian lens?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a lot
Yeah,
of questions in one.
I know it's hard.
Um,
So pick whatever.
We
like,
just barraged you with
yeah,
questions.
no, but pick
um,
from that, like pick what really grabs you.
Yeah, so to start off, yeah, I do believe that psychic ability and witchcraft go hand in hand, and not necessarily witchcraft, what I would call magic. Other people might call energy manipulation, or pick your word. But just as sort of an umbrella thing, I believe that it's the same thing. It's input and output. And if you can learn one, you can do the other. And that was the whole premise of Psychic Witch, of like reverse engineering once we got the psychic talents down to like output it. And I I don't know. I mean, I'm obviously biased because I'm a psychic and a witch. But I believe that those are crucial skills for investigation. Not that everyone investigating has to have it, but to have someone there because you're working with spirit and spirit communicates through psychic faculties. And that's one of the reasons that I'm very big on the idea that like our psychic senses aren't extensions of our physical senses,
Mhm.
but rather our physical senses are crystallization of our natural spirit senses because we're in physical form. So just having someone there that can like, it's like going to a foreign country and not having anyone who speaks the language, right? Like you need someone there that like speaks the language so you get a better idea of what's going on. And then like, obviously the witch part, it depends on what's going on. I mean, obviously, like you probably want to go in with some form of protection. And there may be things that the spirit needs, or things to do. And sometimes that is help crossing over. But in the majority of my experience, it tends not to be. That tends to be sort of a very rare thing that a spirit is actually like stuck.
Yeah. Kicking them out to me is like the nuclear option.
Yeah.
And only under some very, very specific circumstances. And I've been doing this for enough decades. Like every once in a while, there is some little human spirit that it just got a little confused and is like,
Yeah.
oh, wait, I'm dead? I thought there was flames or something. Maybe angels with what?
Right.
I'm like, no, hey, you're the master of your own destiny. Go do what you want to do.
Well, and like, especially like we're going to where they are, it's not like, they're coming to our house, and then we're dealing with them in that kind of a way. Like we're approaching them and then to like seek them out and then push them out.
Yeah.
Like,
No, it's rude. It's intolerably rude.
yeah, it's like clearing a forest to build a mall,
Mhm. Yeah, that's something that we have been talking about a lot is the like dude bro phenomena that's happening in the paranormal space.
Yeah.
Dudes who shout at ghosts.
Yeah.
Dudes who stare at goats. Yep, can't say that.
Yeah.
Men who dudes who
You know
shout.
what I meant. Men who stare at goats, dudes who shout at ghosts.
Yes. Um
Yeah, that's a great way to put it is the dude bro thing. And that's what I meant by like the bullying, going in
Yeah.
and antagonizing and like what even bugs me the most about the antagonizing is often they will make a promise to the spirit, like
Mhm.
do this and we'll leave. And then they do it and they're like, oh, we got a thing. Like, let's go.
Cool, do it again.
Yeah. It's like you just made like a contract with the spirit and then broke it immediately.
And then they're surprised if something kicks them in the butt.
Right.
Yeah.
Like they're just like, oh no, something bad happened to me. Well, you were asking for it, right? Like that's your proof. Enjoy the consequences of your own actions.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to think like I'm a very extroverted person and really I love people and I can't imagine ever walking into someone's house and just like yelling at them. So I don't know how does that not like cross over or translate to spirits, like why would you ever treat anyone like that, any entity like that?
My personal take after observing a lot of people is that a distinct difference between paranormal and magical culture is a lot of the folks in the paranormal don't exactly believe. They're looking for proof so that they can feel justified in believing. Maybe they really want to believe, but deep down, they kind of don't think it's real. And they're asking for a bolt from the heavens. Like they kind of want to just shout at God and be struck by lightning to prove that God exists. If they blaspheme hard enough, it's sort of the same attitude of like, if they push something hard enough and they actually get cut for it, they actually get punched back, that might prove to them that it's real. They're daring themselves to believe.
Yeah.
Matt, if you could just snap your fingers and have a perfect, in your opinion, and by your definition, paranormal show, what would you include from like a magical perspective?
From a magical perspective, I don't know. I don't know if I understand the question fully. So what do you mean, like, snap my fingers and have something from a magical perspective in a paranormal show?
What would
Sorry.
your ideal team look like?
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, obviously, like I was saying, like people with psychic and mediumship skills under their belt. I would want people that can manage energy safely. And this is something that, like, I think even magical people sometimes like have problem with because of their own like hubris or ego, which is realizing like what am I not strong in that someone else might be strong in. So I think like having a team that's well balanced, like so someone who's good with boundaries and holding space, and someone who's good with like healing, someone who's good with banishings if that needs to happen, if it escalates to that level. You know, I don't know. I just think when it comes to people, like one of the things I love about this show is like it's super queer inclusive. There's not enough of that. And it seems like because I follow Michelle on Twitter, and I follow Greg and Dana on Twitter too, and that tends to be my kind of main paranormal tie-in.
We're
And
all
like,
like, though.
from them, not directly, but like stuff I see from them reposting and our mutuals, like I realized like, oh, there's a huge like transphobic, like homophobic problem in the paranormal community. Which I don't think is just paranormal. I mean, we see that in witchcraft too, and in occultism and paganism. It's just sort of the like flavor in the air of politics right now, unfortunately. So seeing diversity is important, in terms of gender, sexuality, people of color, because that's another thing is like the shows all tend to be like white, straight, cis men, and then maybe like they bring on a woman for mediumship that they don't listen to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Generally, that woman has to have a certain look. Like,
yeah, totally.
Age range for that too. Like there's, there was a paranormal cartoon, a little comic at one point where they lampooned that, and they had this big busty blonde come on as like Bam Bam McGee or something, and just
and her paradigm has to match theirs too. I've noticed that.
Oh yeah,
like because there's a lot of times like, and I don't know if it's the editing too, because that is a thing. But I just hear things and I'm like, how could you be a medium and have that world belief that you're saying right now, like through direct experience? So
yeah. Well, like, let's see. I'd love to see a magical person who erred on the side of the practical and not jump to the extreme fantastical side of the paranormal. This also is a good point of like someone who's not like so deep into their own woo that they're not also like I try to like have my feet on the ground and my head in the clouds at the same time, and sometimes it's a little weird and wibbly, but like all of the courses in psychology help. Like you can't psychic stuff without some
the other side too. So I think it's about balance. So I think a lot of like what we're saying is the problem with paranormal right now is that it tends to go to science and trying to dissect it too much with science and machines, and like ignoring the whole realm of spirit that they're like trying to investigate.
Yeah, because that whole investigation, the investigation itself is a quest. Like that is a journey. That is something that is worth documenting as much as random knocks on the wall if you ask for them. Like,
Mhm.
in my opinion, is more important. Like, how is it changing the people who are on this quest to inquire how big is our world really?
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I often say it's like the woo goes so far that it like it de-woos
So,
itself. It's like it's I don't know what happens. It's like
Ouroboros.
yeah, exactly. And I feel that there's like a moment when I do like pre-calls for the podcast where I'm like, okay, I'll have pretty much anyone on. I mean, I'm a full molder. I want to believe. I'm actively like wanting to talk to people who believe, but occasionally you run across someone and you're just like, oh wow, like there's nothing we cannot do this. Oh, look at this nice banner.
Yay.
Thank you, tech team.
Well, and I think a lot of like occultism is very big on that. Like on the, I mean, you could word it in like many different ways. Like we could look at it as like pillars of the tree of life, or we could look at it like right brain, left brain. But this whole idea of like the middle, like keeping the rational and the irrational and realizing that they both have their place and they're both real, without getting too lost in one or the other.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I was thinking back to when I tried to get you pulled into the Travel Channel's Haunted Salem Live, and like just all the weird moving parts for that. Some of which came down to like time and scheduling, but some of which I think came down to we don't know if we can give our audience enough context for what's going to happen with this, and that's a frequent thing that I hear, that they'll cut stuff out because they assume the audience isn't going to understand it, or it's going to take too much work on their part to give the audience context for this thing that is outside of, again, a Christianized Western European way of looking at the world. And the problem is that just silos all of us. It keeps us in this echo chamber of like everything is just throw holy water at it and it's fine.
Right. Well, and like that's the thing is like when we coddle society like that, like if they don't know, like as a viewer and they're interested, they'll go find out,
Mhm.
it'll inspire them to like research it. But if they're not exposed to it,
Yeah. Well, I have a film background, and I don't know if y'all are Aaron Sorkin fans, but The Social Network and like West Wing.
West, I love West Wing.
West Wing is one of my favorite shows. But one of the things that he teaches all the time is that you cannot treat your audience like they're dum-dums. And so all of his dialogue is super fast, and it's like, big concepts, but like those are great shows that win loads of awards. And it's
yeah,
because there is an audience for that. There's an audience that can handle it. And for you to think that they're that dumb is insulting. Not to
yeah,
say that humans can't be dumb. We absolutely
No, but
yeah,
but the default assumption that you have to like, I don't know, soak the bread in like milk and like hand it to the
yes.
Mike Flanagan, I think takes a similar approach. Midnight Mass is a really good example of that. It's vampire horror thing. It's not nonfiction by any stretch, but it is also deep philosophical concepts about life and death and what comes after it. It's this profound meditation, and he doesn't pretend. Like there's just long soliloquies and like it. Yeah, he does not hand stuff off to the viewers, and I think that there are a lot of us who would prefer that.
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, the stuff that I tend to enjoy in general for media, and I'm not talking nonfiction,
Yeah.
um, but like are movies where you're like, whoa, like what the hell just happened? And like so you sit there like, theorizing and thinking about it. I also like if anyone follows me on social media, like I like really weird music by other people's standards. I love very abstract where the lyrics aren't straightforward and it's like, it's more of a like a contemplation,
Yeah.
Yeah, things that your brain can chew on, like good
Yeah.
chunky stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also want to say real quick that the viewers, if you have questions about specifically witchcraft or psychic perception or the paranormal or where those things intersect, feel free to share those questions with any of us as
Yeah,
we
I
continue on this journey.
fall in the same school of thought as Matt, where one person's going to call it magic, one person's going to call it witchcraft, one person's going to call it vampirism, and like energy work, psychic stuff. Like they are all like clustered, arguably facets of the same very complicated jewel.
Mhm.
At
Like
the core, it's
yeah, at the core, it's the same thing, and it's just kind of like where the light is refracting.
yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think that what we're trying to do with these shows is really just kind of put the whole narrative for both paths on its head, you know, a little bit, and get the viewer to think a little bit differently than they might normally about the paranormal.
From Leanne, I absolutely love the incorporating of all in these shows you guys are a part of. It's educational for others that might otherwise not know, and that's true. Like trying to, if somebody brings up a new technique, it's not going to be like, what's Thelema? I don't know what Thelema is. Like, find somebody who practices. I mean,
Mhm.
wealthy music, and be like, maybe you could like.
That was weird. Elfie.
Hello, Elfie. That was not planned.
That's interesting.
From Elfie. Hello, all. What gets to me about practitioners trying to science the occult is when they try to overlay science terms on occult practice but don't fully understand the hard science. And that is a very true problem. If I had a nickel for every
Quantum.
person, like, yeah, quantum,
Anything quantum.
or like somebody like came at me with dark matter. I'm like, do you know who my wife's grandmother was?
That was a no-no.
There's enough about like you are wrong on dark matter. Well, how do you know? My wife's grandmother discovered it. I maybe know the people who know about this.
I would actually like to pick your brain about that. You know, even though we're like, oh yeah, you know, trying to science the woo, but I'm like, oh, that's a subject that I'm like interested in sciencing the woo.
My favorite lesson from Dr. Vera Rubin is this. She discovered dark matter because we had all of this data, and then there was a gap in the data. Basically, the data showed us that there was a negative space that we couldn't perceive. And instead of saying, we can't perceive it, therefore it doesn't exist, she was like, but there's a clear pattern around which all of our other perceptions, like we have obviously a blind spot here. So what is that? And having that plasticity of mind, as a scientist or not as a scientist, to go, okay, we can measure all of this. Here are things that people experience. We can't measure them, but there's still a shape. So what is that? Some people call it magic, and some people call it paranormal, and some people don't call it anything at all because they're just terrified and on a level of like existential cosmic dread that what's on the other side of that is Cthulhu.
I really like that. What, Matt? I'd love to hear about some of your paranormal experiences if you're open to sharing them.
Oh my God. So that is so hard because like I just don't think in those terms anymore. Like it's such an integrated thing. Like even the other night with like Devin was like, oh, there were spirits in your room. And I was like, oh yeah, like they've been coming like like I didn't even mention it. Like, you know, like it's just it's sort of like having cats, to bring it around to cats. Like when you live with cats, their presence you just kind of don't even pay attention to. Like, you know, they're in the room, part of your brain kind of like recognizes it, but it just becomes such an average thing. I'm trying to think back to like the more like intense, like
Yeah, or even one of your earlier ones before you were, you know, desensitized to it.
But also the funny is, from a paranormal investigator's standpoint, any successful ritual or spell you do is technically paranormal. Like you have done a thing in something non-physical. Like there are obvious results, whether
Yeah.
synchronicity or like something happens in the world. And from a paranormal investigator's standpoint, like that, here is the Holy Grail. Here's the thing I need to like throw the EMF meter at. Whereas a practitioner is just like, yay, it worked.
Well, and especially like coming from such a big like witchcraft paradigm, like even the word paranormal like
Mhm.
isn't real for us, like because we don't it's like supernatural, like it kind of, I mean I get like what it's getting at, but like it we don't see these things as beyond nature or beyond normal, like it's just the paying attention to it is what is not normal.
No, I would agree. There's a scientist recently who wrote an article basically saying that if we had proof of ghosts, they wouldn't be paranormal, because if we had something measurable, they would just be natural.
Yeah.
And he was saying it kind of as a gotcha, and I'm like, well, duh. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yes, psychic abilities too. There's nothing like supernatural about that. Actually, I think all of these things are incredibly essential to our lived experience as
Mhm.
people who are walking around on this rock. Like it's just part of the part of the warp and the weft of reality.
Yeah. Well, and I think like physical reality is like the smallest part of reality, you
Mhm.
know? So it's like it's interesting like how our blinders are so focused on like the smallest part of the metaphysical reality, you know?
I mean,
Um,
skin's distracting and all, but yeah.
It's very. Ask him
From
strongest
Lonnie,
player
ask
is.
him what his strongest Claire is and whether it's not a Dane.
Oh my God. Lonnie, get out of here.
I love Lonnie.
I
Yeah,
love
no,
Lonnie.
I do too. I took such a trust fall with Lonnie, such a huge trust. You know a little bit about like some of the like past mythical history with my house Kepru, which is basically a mystery school vampire house, but like we have been so tight-lipped about the past life stuff for so many reasons. I let Lonnie do a hypnosis past
Oh,
life thing for me on camera.
oh wow. On camera.
I gave him a couple of triggers to take me back to a point where I've done a lot of work with it, so I've got a lot of known stuff, but there were a couple of things where I'm like, yeah, I still think I would be very curious to see how my experience or recollection of this changes or shifts in a space where some of my boundaries have been taken down.
Hmm.
I will say that that was a doozy of a filming night. I remember the entire cast and crew while you were under just going like, yeah, it was intense.
I can't imagine what it would have been like to be in the room with that. Like it was hard enough, and I took the mask off when I was done. I did it blindfolded, and it was just soggy. Like I'd been like full on weeping.
Yeah. Yeah. So those of you listening, if you want to watch that, pledge to our Kickstarter campaign.
Which is to say, Lonnie is fantastic, and
Yes,
I'm
he is.
glad that he was the person that we trusted with that, because that was a lot to trust anybody with.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I do want to know, Claire Dane's side.
Yeah.
What is your
Yeah.
strongest, Claire, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, so my strongest Claire, I mean, it kind of shifts, but like I would say my strongest, like throughout my life, has been clairtangency and external clairvoyance. Like those are the two that are like, because I believe every psychic sense has an internal version as well as an external version. So like the internal clairvoyance, I've had to put a lot of work into developing, which surprises people because that tends to be their like the average person's strongest clair. But for me, like I have always been able to like see spirits, and it's not always like people think it's like seeing people, and it's not. Like it's like seeing sentient energy move. And sometimes I see that as like shadowy things, sometimes I see it as like smoky things, sometimes I see it as lights. But like I can see that, and if I sit down with someone in a reading, like I start seeing their aura, and that's the same sort of external sight. Clairtangency is really strong for me. I can feel energy. So even when I was younger, like I could, like when we knew that there was like a spirit in the house or something, like, and we didn't know quite where it was. This is before I had any sort of training or anything. I would do, I would kind of radar with my hands, where I would just like literally like scan the room and be able to tell like, oh, it's moving now, you know? Um, so yeah, those tend to be the strongest. But I have all of them. I think the weakest tends to be most people's weakest, which is clairgustance and clairalience, the tasting and the smelling, um, and even more so tasting than smell, just because they're underdeveloped senses in general for humans.
Mhm.
Like we don't even have a good language for taste. And that's why, like, you know, when people try to describe wine, they have to like kind of approximate other, like it's kind of a chocolatey, earthy, like because we don't have words for what we're trying to describe. But yeah,
Strong undercurrent of stone fruit. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, yes. Well, oh, well, I was going to do the other one. But
From Devin. Question for Michelle and Fen. Was there an episode that you recorded where you wish you had had a witch with you?
well, I am a practicing witch, but maybe a witch of like a higher caliber. Here's what I'll say. I will say that having Michelle and Stephanie, one of the other cast members, on set, never made me feel like I needed anybody else as far as magical workings go. And I'm saying that from like generally from like a safety standpoint. Like if anything went haywire, I know that those people can get us out as a crew and a cast, especially like varying degrees of people who are comfortable with the woo. I don't know that there was a time where we were like, oh, I wish there was somebody that was. We did have a witch, and we had we did have one witch. Do you remember when we did the ritual at the end?
There was, well, okay, so there was one that I was doing a remote reading for. So I don't know where you were at. That's one of the things is for inhuman beings. I did a lot of remote work. I still don't know what they were doing. They were at a bunch of different locations, but one felt like there was some really potent, like land spirit, land white kind of stuff going on. And I've worked with Christopher Penzak before, like in person. I introduced him to one of the local land spirits and had things respond in such an incontrovertible, exuberant way. In the back of my head, I was like, if I could only toss it at Christopher, like Christopher would know what this was immediately, like it would talk to Christopher, where some of those things won't talk to me. Like the vibe is just, they're just like, what are you anyway? Like, why are you poking around? Get shoo with your weird self.
Yeah, I can totally see what you're like knowing Christopher and like his spiritual practice too. I can totally see exactly like what you're saying and why you're saying that. Like,
And for me, it's more like I know there's various people that I've worked with or gotten like a vibe for, and I like this person would be perfect for this.
right.
But I'm also a pragmatist, so I'm like, but this is what we've got. So like who can kind of like vibe like that or get a little context to like experiment.
Right.
But I will. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no.
I was just gonna say I'll just speak for everyone on the cast and crew and say, Devin and Matt, you're more than welcome informally to come and join us on any of the shows if you'd like.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I know we can trust you.
Yeah, that's popping up in readings.
This was the one where I was gonna. He has all kinds of stories from being a reader.
But the question is not to put you on the spot, but like, is there one that you want to share where a spirit just sort of came through unannounced?
Yeah, I mean, spirit is such a broad term, right? So it goes back to sort of like what we were saying about like paranormal shows. Like like standard ones where it's like everything's like a demon or a ghost. It's sort of like saying like everything is either a frog or a dog and that's it, you know.
Yeah.
So like I have spirits all the time when I'm doing readings. You know, sometimes it's like mediumship, like it's like deceased people. Sometimes it's non-people spirits, and sometimes I don't always identify what it is, you know. And sometimes they don't always communicate, and that's the thing too, is if I know that they've heard me and they're not communicating back, then I'm, you know, I'm not going to like pester them. I'm not going to be like, knock 4 times and we'll leave, you know. Like, are you a coward? You know?
Yeah.
I
Quit,
love that you
bro.
called it dude
Bro.
bro, because it's
Yeah.
totally dude
From
bro.
behind you, bro.
Yeah, no, it's like, yeah, come on.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, a lot of like it depends. So like I'm trying to think of Salem, because Salem's a different environment where I did not always have full control of the energy, despite, because I mean there are times in October, it doesn't matter how strong it is. I know very few people who could hold it as a quarantine during the reading
Yep.
for things not to come through or pop in.
I confirm that.
Yeah,
Salem and New Orleans would be the two places where, like, if you're doing readings and stuff, just
that would be the
it
other
is
one.
no indication of your weakness or anything if stuff is just popping up, because those places are just very
Yeah.
active.
Yeah, because my like my private practice, or if I'm just reading for someone, like I have control of the energy, and usually like things that are unwelcomed would not even be able to, or I think even dare. Yeah, even though that sounds kind of like jerkish, but dude bro.
No.
I think the most common thing that comes unexpected is sometimes I see attachments or like parasites on people, and it's a lot more common than I think people realize, and it's not always as negative as, you know, it sounds really, really dark and horrible, and like obviously you don't want parasites, but it's also like kind of a natural thing. It's like part of the spirit ecosystem, and they have their place as well. I think it's
Like the
when it's
spray-
an when it's an unhealthy
Yeah.
level. So it's sort of like you still need negative back, or like not, you need bacteria in you that is not you to digest and live. You know, I think the problem is when it's to a point and a type where it's detrimental to the person, or it's more along the lines of what I refer to as an attachment, which usually is when there's an intelligence behind it, beyond like an animistic type thing. Um, so I've had that. So, because like even if you have like your kind of quarantined energetic space, if you're allowing that person in and it's attached to them. Um, so I've had experiences with that have been sometimes kind of uncomfortable, because like I can see that like um they've tied in like delusional beliefs into the person. And I'm not it's different than like I'm not saying it's mental illness, like it's something different but something close, where it's suddenly like they're like, you know, I know that I have this connection to like this witch that was killed in Salem, using that as an example, and like
God.
I've been called to Salem and da 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 da, and I've had dreams and da 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 da, and like I'm like it's that thing. It's not this muggle woman who was accused and tortured for witchcraft.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, the
yeah, yeah. For readings though, like it just tends to be mediumship, and it tends to be like I kind of go the more like classic spiritualist route when it comes to mediumship. Like if it's for a client reading, like I don't do a lot of like ancestral work, which I see as a different form of that spirit. I tend to go towards the higher selves of the deceased for that kind of communication. I know other people work differently. But yeah, I'm rambling now. But.
No,
No, it's good.
I was thinking with the attachments, because like people are like demon, and somebody
Yeah.
who has to who's done psychic triage for that. Like there's things that are effectively you walked through somewhere and you picked up a tick, and it
Yes,
is
exactly.
like, in a small circumstance maybe that would lead to bigger problems, but mostly it's just here, it's gone, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's a little icky, or there's little ones that are like literally like leeches, like they're just sort of like you walk through somewhere, you've got something that's like siphoning a little bit of your energy. You're not going to notice a lot of it, but you might be like, I feel a little icky.
Right.
Those aren't demons. There's no like great like war between darkness and light as you try to get those off. Like you basically do some energy work where it's like, I am
Yes.
pouring some vinegar on this so you taste bad for a minute and it'll all be good.
And that's what I mean too, of like, like it's not as bad as we think. Like,
Yeah.
so like, it's not like the person, because there's a lot of really old like occult and spiritual beliefs of like what a person does to bring this onto them, like it's like almost like a judgment on their part. But
Mhm.
it's like what you're saying, like just like walking through the woods and picking up a tick, like there's probably some precautions you could have taken that could have helped prevent that, but
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that you're like a bad person or like, did something
Yeah.
to cause that upon yourself.
Yeah, you were not inherently dirty because you picked up a tick.
Yeah.
Right.
You just forgot your deed or
Mhm.
off or whatever. Yeah. And so similarly, I like this analogy, like thinking of it that way, because I don't think a lot of people think
No.
that way. Yeah.
Like
I
I
mean,
said,
but then
Christian
there are,
European.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Oh yeah, sorry, we talked to everyone. That Christianized Western European mindset, like
Yeah.
this discussion never comes up. And to you.
Yeah. Well, and then like, there are things that are, like I said, that I in my terminology, I refer to as an attachment, as opposed to like a parasite, which it's still usually a parasitical being. And even their motives can range. Like it's not so black and white. I think spirits are at least as complex as humans.
Mhm.
At least. Yeah.
At least. And that includes motives and drives and all sorts of things. So
From Lonnie, question from a friend. What do you do if you feel a psychic vampire is feeding on your energy without your consent? I'd like to hear what the witch has to say, because I get this question all the damn time.
so if someone is interfering with my energy field in a way that I do not consent, and I believe that it is intentional, whether this is a person or a non-physical
Yeah.
entity. I do things to my energy to make sure that they don't do it again and they back off immediately. And this tends to be like things that kind of hurt them, like electricity and sharpness and, just things that are like, it's not so much like I'm trying to hurt someone, but it's like that sort of like that like nature does it all the time, like back the fuck off, like
I teach that as monarch butterfly technique, where you make your energy taste bad so that they don't try to eat you again. Like you like give them just a mouthful of, you want my energy? All right, have a bunch of ick.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's sort of like
I really like that.
Yeah, you're just, I'm going to taste bad. So you focus on just a really negative emotion, a really annoying noise, just something, and you're just like, have a mouthful of bleh.
Yeah. Yeah, I do the noise thing too. Like that's especially when it comes to interacting with other people energetically, noise is such a big thing for me. And I teach it a little bit at the end of Psychic Witch, but I don't really go into the depth. But like that whole idea of like if I need people to back the fuck off or like to be like the I started using and teaching barking dogs, like really aggressive barking dogs, to help my fellow readers who were female that had to walk to their car
Mm.
alone and stuff, So just this idea of like back away, you know, and it's not like the person, unless they're like incredibly psychic and picks it up, is going to hear, you know, dogs barking, but
Right.
it's going to give them hesitation,
Yeah.
you know, and that hesitation can be a big difference between like an attack or not.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're like redirecting their focus.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Most people don't think of themselves as psychic because it doesn't breach consciousness.
right.
Mhm.
But the unconscious reaction, which they'll usually describe as like a gut feeling or instinct, they still respond to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
From Leanne, did you guys, during the filming of these shows, get answers that surprised you, or was
That's a
it what
good
you were expecting?
Mm.
I know Fen got a bunch.
I feel like, did we get answers, or I feel like we got, well, okay, I know what you're talking about. Yes, I
Yeah.
feel like I did get answers about my personal spiritual path or magical path. I think that we got more questions as far as the whole
Mhm.
both projects. Like no matter how much we thought we could figure something out and we were like, oh, we can corroborate this or this or this, it was still like, but now there's 30 more questions just where that is now, that like answer, so to speak, is.
Yeah, it's like a magic trick where you're pulling a scarf out of your hat. And you're like, I haven't answered the
I
question.
have
Wait,
something.
question.
Yeah. Oh,
I
wait,
haven't answered
wait.
it's a question.
Yes, it's
It's
forever.
going.
But I do think everybody, you know, it's interesting when you do projects like this because you know, not the entire cast and crew, they're not all plugged into the woo. You know, a substantial portion are, but some aren't. And so they come in and we're just like, oh, it's going to be another show. We're just going to do our dang thing as a second camera operator or a, you know, whatever, lighting or sound or whatever. And then they, by the end of it, or not even the end, like a few days into it, they're like, oh, this is something else. This is this is something where like not only are we all going on a thing as a collective like organism together, but we're also uh learning so much about the interior of ourselves, you know, in those quiet moments when you're in your like room in a haunted house, you know, or whatever is happening at that time.
I will say there was a thing that surprised me. And it was was it geocaching? That
Oh,
thing?
randonauting.
Randonauting. What so
Mhm.
you propose this idea of like, here's this thing where we're just gonna like put in some numbers or something, and then our phones tell us to go to a location. And I was like, this seems ridiculous, but sure, okay, let's try it.
Don't give away the full,
Oh
but
no, I'm not giving away anything. I'm just going to say that I went in with that with like, I will be game for this because I will try it, but I am quietly very skeptical that there's any possible way that this could work at all and lead to anything relevant to anything. But I guess we're going on a car trip. Uh,
so magical.
and then it was like, that's a little too on point. But not everybody involved at that moment knew why it was like why I was like, well, Steph was just like looking at me and I'm like,
It's really awesome, and I know that y'all both know this, like when a group gets together and that feeling of when the group has now become something more than just a handful of strangers. It's like you're on a mission.
this is a fantastic one from Buck. Where do you find the hedge straddling aspect of gender, queer, and LGBTQ perspective affects the approach to paranormal investigations and the particular ways in which we tap into our magic?
Ooh, good
My
question.
first thing is like, you hear me go on about how like all the labels and it's not binary and like it's never as simple as that, and like that is fundamental to my lived experience as a magical being, as an intersex being, as like every aspect of how I exist in the world tells me that any label or word that we have to apply to something is never the whole story,
Mhm.
that it can change, and that reality is never as simple as a binary. It's never black and white. It's never good and evil. It's so much more complex than that because we are.
Mhm. Yeah, the intrinsic liminality of being queer and non-binary or non-binary is synonymous in a lot of ways to the liminality of a paranormal investigation, I think. Yeah, which is essentially what you just said. But
yeah, well, it's why I say, like, make the paranormal queer again, because magic inherently is queer. It's beyond the boundaries. It breaks boundaries. It subverts expectations. It moves in directions that are often antinomian and forbidden, and that's how that's where power comes from.
That's a point that you just touched on that I was thinking while you were talking. I agree with everything that both of you said. But I think there's also like a psychological societal
Mhm.
aspect to it, to where like when you grow up queer, you are essentially presented, if you come to terms with this idea that the consensus agreement about things that society holds may not necessarily be true or good.
Yeah.
And I think that does like that, you just kind of just having that openness of that part of society, I think makes it easier to sort of like question and, kind of consensus agreements of just like reality in
Mhm.
general. Um,
Yeah. No.
from religion to politics to like the metaphysical.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's why you see so many queer practitioners.
Mhm.
If you have accepted that part of your personality, that part of your reality, you've accepted that reality is not as simple as anyone told you it had to be.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's such a good point. Yeah, and that like moment when I was like a young teenager, when I was like, oh wait, like the status quo isn't what you just said, like good or true.
Yeah.
And then that like unpacking of that and being like, oh, well, what does that mean for me? What are the implications of that? So yeah, I think that's
One big implication is going to be, why we are not so hot to jump to it's a demon, it's demonic, is we've all been called.
we're
Yes.
yeah.
We're going to hell, we're demonic, we're
Mhm.
all of this stuff, we're corrupted. And we know that that is somebody else's perspective being projected onto us.
Mhm.
And it is being interpreted through a lens that is not true at all.
Mhm.
So I will give every spirit the benefit of the doubt, no matter what it looks like. I mean, it could be a Balrog standing in my thing. Actually, that's another story. It can look like a Balrog, and if the Balrog is willing to just sit down and, like, put his pinky out when we have tea and have a conversation with me, I'm going to have a conversation with the Balrog and be very polite. Not
Mhm.
because he's a Balrog, but because he is a being who
Mhm.
is intelligent and we are communicating. And that's, the least we can offer is a little bit of politeness.
You need to do a Kickstarter for that where you just have tea.
So no,
Like
no joke. So I work
like conversations recorded.
Yeah.
I work with a bunch of disembodied, and not all Keprian disembodied present like people. And there is one who I have to warn people, if he's going to show up. I'm like, okay, so cousin Ashir is he's going to look like a bit much, kind of like a Balrog, but he's a really nice dude. Just
You have the
don't freak out. That's not a demon. That's a sheer. He just likes to look that way. It's fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, what one of the disembodied that you work with who came forward, I mean, I felt the entire cast and crew was like, okay, like we're all gonna barf. So I mean, there's definitely like different flavors of
Oh,
entities.
mhm.
Yeah, I mean, that was. Have any of you ever run across a person with an energy totally unlike anything you've ever encountered before? Like an energy that makes you go, wait, what are you?
Okay. First of all, I'm actually more at this point shocked when I'm like, you're a regular human boy. Wow. I don't get to see that often. That's really strange. All of my friends are very weird. Not all of them are from here. I do a lot of energy body readings. Not so much as like I'm doing a reading on the person, but it's usually preparatory to do energy work to clear blockages and do stuff for health. But reading them first is part of that. I was teaching a class on it. And, as part of the class, people would get up on the little Reiki table and we'd trade readings and stuff. And so this this girl who had just kind of gotten dragged along by her friend, but she was here for it. She was like that sort of like airy fairy, manic pixie dream girl, like default, and wasn't really taking anything seriously. She gets up on the table. I go poking around, and usually there's like energy centers and things that you can find. They're not always the like rubber stamped 7 chakras. Like everybody's built different. But I'm at first not finding anything, and then I find just one big core, seems like an energy center. And as I go to investigate it, it is a big fucking eye. It's like a hole in reality with like this eye like peering through, being like, "What's it like over here?" And I'm like, "Okay, well, no, not malevolent, just." I'm like, so I get a feeling like you have this general sense that you're just here for the experience. You don't really feel very connected to this world. It's all just fun. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, I don't know what I'm looking at here, but
nice to meet you.
Well, now I'm just imagining like Zoe Deschanel with like a giant interdimensional like eyeball, like.
Michelle,
the enormity of like, okay, I'm not even sure where that goes, but okay.
What
about you, Matt? Misunderstood beholder.
I think I'm always surprised by spirits, just because I still have ingrained in me, as much as I know it's not true, that they're going to be person formed, because we're very human centric. When it comes to people and their energy, I mean, I think like Michelle's energy has surprised me.
Same girl, same.
Yeah. I have figured, I don't know how much I can talk about certain topics, but I've met people who have had an energy thing going on that I like have not been able to like discern, but I was drawn to them and I love them. But now that I'm let in on it, I'm like, oh, I like that's so yeah, I mean, I think I'm always surprised because I don't like, I keep myself open, but I also have that kind of like, I grew up as a human, in this society. So, even watching ghost hunters and movies and stuff where it's always a human ghost or it's a demon, and even those demons are human formed, but like, no one prepares you for like, floating interdimensional like octopi looking things, or like
that's unsettling. Yeah. Well, at first, and then
yeah, the ones that throw me are the ones where they just don't there's a physical human body, and then what's actually like inhabiting that body doesn't fit into that body at all. And I mean, my experience of the way bodies work is they're basically a virtual reality glove. Like it's built to be sort of like modular, but if you kind of need to have 4 fingers and a thumb and the right size to sort of fit in, and maybe they can modulate them a little bit up and a little bit down. But if you have a flipper, you're not going to be able to get in the virtual reality glove the same way. It's going to require a lot of like back end fixing to try to make it accessible to someone who's radically built differently. So when something that really doesn't like fit easily into one of these things manages somehow to like, through just sheer intention and whatever, like has fit, it's always like a, is that comfortable at all?
Do you know what it makes me think of? The cockroach in the human body in Men in Black.
Yes. Yeah. Sugar.
Your skin is hanging off your bones, Edward.
That's like my favorite part of the whole movie.
That's
like
the best part.
Yeah, just that intro and that interaction between them is just so good.
So good. Yeah. So good. Yes.
Yeah, we're not all human. We are not all human beings having a human experience.
Yeah.
Some of us are shaped differently.
This is the best. Well, I'm cooking. Oh, you're welcome, Devin.
What you cooking, Devin?
Yeah,
I,
what
I I think one of the things that has surprised me, not so much about like people, but like spirits,
Mm.
was when I was first really getting into spirit work, and then working with fairies or
Mm.
like entities that
Mhm.
classify by our standards themselves as
Mm.
fairies, because my my perception of what that was gonna be versus like how it actually like presented and its
Mm.
energy
Mhm.
was it's to where like I now see it as like a classification as a
Mm.
like a scientific like
Mhm.
like there's a scientific classification for a whole range of animals, and I
Yeah.
feel like that's sort of similar with like the fairy like I think Brian Froud does a really good job with it, because he has some of these like really odd, like sometimes terrifying like creatures, along with these like really whimsical, cute, like what you would think of as like a sprite fairy. Um,
Yeah, I remember like early on in the paranormal reality TV being like, "Well, that's Faye, that's a fairy," and they're like, "We don't, you just no, say something
Just
else."
no.
Everything was just like, "Call it an elemental," and I'm like, "It's not a salamander, a sylph, a gnome, or oh, never mind."
yeah.
Never mind.
Well, and, like, a lot of, like, the poltergeist
Yeah.
stuff, like, I mean, I do believe that there are poltergeists where, like, even a deceased spirit can have
Mm.
under the right circumstances, can do those things, but, like, that's typically, like, classic fairy shit,
Yeah.
including the messing with you, you
Mhm.
Yeah.
know?
Like the talking mongoose that was like super documented. There's a
I don't know
talking
about that.
mongoose, I think in the Isle of Man, Gef,
Uh,
or Jeff, Gef, pronounce it however you will. But was a talking mongoose poltergeist that was like well documented. People saw it, people talked with it, and I'm like, that's a puka. Like that's straight
Mhm.
up a puka, a bogle, a bogey, whatever like that. That is a fairy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that tends to be, like, kind of a joke, like, like a half joke amongst, like, witches. I would say witches more than
Mm.
just general occultism, because 'cause we're a little bit more faith focused. But, like, this idea of, like, I much rather go into, like, a demon-infested house
Hmm.
than, like, a house with, like, pissed off fairies, like,
100%.
any day of the week. Like,
100%.
because demons, like, aren't that hard to, like, take care of if you need to take care of them, and but, like
Honestly, give me a demon over a pissed off angel any day.
Yeah, well, yeah, that too, I guess, but I definitely have had, some very, very uncomfortable, like, the worst night of my life was with Faye. Like, I will, like, I don't fuck around
They
there.
literally almost did like fairy let a friend. So I live in Northeast Ohio, and um, there are multiple areas around here that are just fey haunted. Period. And if you do not know what you're getting into, or you do not approach the area with a certain amount of respect, you are going to have very classic experiences of being misled, lost time, like shit just gets weird around you. My best friend at the time just didn't believe in this. We were out at one of the parks that I'd grown up like kind of communing with, and they led him. They almost had him walk into the lake, and the thing was is like he just kept walking into this place where like it was just this field that was like all silvery and there were lights and everything, and he was like, this is really interesting and weird and enticing. And to our perception,
Mhm.
he like walked about 10 paces and just disappeared. And so we're like yelling for him, and like his voice is coming from, and he's getting farther and farther away, and there's literally where he was standing, no way he was getting farther than maybe another 3 paces, and he was just, you could just feel reality like just
Mhm.
stretching out around him. It was wild.
I've almost been fairy led. I'm convinced of it. The Temple of Witchcraft does Temple Fest every
Mhm.
year, and they rotate which ray it is, and one of the rays is aligned to fairy. And when it is, they do like a fairy quest, which is like they set up these trails, and they have like little lights so you can walk through the woods and like have an experience with people that are aspecting parts of the temple's court of Fae that they have a strong connection with. But I remember one of the years, I don't remember which year it was, but I was going down the path and then I was confused because I was like, well, the path is leading two ways, like the lights are splitting. And I stopped and I was like, because I questioned it and I just kind of sat there and then all those lights like disappeared. Like they weren't even like there at all.
Yeah, and then you just hear the high-pitched laughter of children vaguely.
Yeah. So I'm like, well, that's good because my instinct was to go that way, So
Yeah. And we definitely, how do you tell the difference between a fairy haunting and a human dead haunting? Oh,
my checklist for assessing, like, because everybody, TV shows, the first thing, is it a ghost? Like, is it actually a spirit or is it an imprint? And then is it human or is it non-human? And like my little internal checklist is it responding to me in a psychological schema that seems human? Because the recently dead humans, like, we carry a lot of our shit with us and we still approach the world with the same like loves and needs and everything, and it feels categorically human. There's an ontological feel. And then everything that is non-human becomes degrees of different. For me, it's a very organic sense, an internal sense, for lack of a term, of flavor, even though it's not a gustatory flavor. Fey energy feels wild and slippery, and it's got this interesting like memory hole aspect that sort of like moves into realms that are like adjacent to but also outside of here in a way that is quite different. And if you've connected to it, you will not mistake it as anything else again. Like, there is a feel.
It's a very specific feeling.
Yeah, there's a very specific feel. So once you've encountered it, you're like, okay, this feels like that, probably a fairy or something that falls under that taxonomy.
And time too.
The time thing is weird. I
always miss.
There's actually, this is, I'm gonna say this thing because I this was important. This is how Evo and I connected. House Kepru, most of us have memories of the past. There are a small group of us that, and I usually know them immediately, that spent a fair amount of time in the UK at some point in the past. And as far as I have been able to piece together, they swore fealty to the land, to the Fae up there. And every single one of them knows they should remember. All of those memories are gone. Like, they're somewhere else. It's like part of them literally still lives somewhere else. Extraordinary.
Because and like this has been a topic by people, but I think like you really nailed it. Like before sharing that, when you were just kind of describing the difference, I don't think they're the same thing, but there's so much in common between the Fae and extraterrestrial entities.
Oh, yes.
And a lot of that has to deal with like exactly what you said of like, it feels like they're simultaneously connected to something else that's slipping in and out. And like, because they both kind of have that. I would say the biggest difference, though, although I don't have a ton of experience with extraterrestrial or have been abducted that I remember, is that like, the Fae tend to have, they're a lot more in touch with physical reality. And I think that's why a lot of people think they're nature spirits or group them as nature spirits or elementals. So they have a lot more command, and I think that's why like the poltergeist stuff, like they can physically interact, whereas aliens are more just like, no, we're gonna take you where we are. Like,
the parallels. Jacques Vallée in Passport to Magonia goes into the parallels where like crop circles happen for both lost time and abductions and changelings, and all of these are part of both
Lights.
the lores. Lights in the sky, like mists and things.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think you hit the key difference is I don't necessarily believe the Fae were originally from here. They seem to be from something adjacent to here, but they've settled roots.
Yes.
And they are invested in this space, and they like this human world, and they like sometimes adopting the trappings of it. And for that reason, like, there's a categorical difference from something that feels like it's very not from here, like distinctly elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's interesting because there was a location that we went to that had, during one of these shows, that had both. And so when we were in a certain part of the property, which was like, I think like 100 or some acres, there was this very like other like pulling. And then when we went to another part of the property where there was like an actual fairy ring, a tree, a ring, a ring of trees, there was a different feeling. It was like more like sucking in as opposed to pulling out. Yeah.
The people under the hill.
Yeah.
And there's a whole thing there. Like, and I recognize like there's bits and pieces, and part of my own personal practice is I know I believe at some point there was an alliance. There was an oath sworn, and I don't remember, and by part of the oath, like I don't remember all of the pieces of it. I just know that like there's favors that we can trade back and forth, but there's also rules, and I don't usually know the rules until I've like face planted into them.
Yes.
Which sort of seems to be like their whole thing.
That's fascinating.
It's a thing. It's a very weird, and it's slippery to like hold in my head.
Mm.
In ways that certain types of magic and awareness are.
Yeah.
I like the much more straightforward, just like I'm talking to a psychic, like a human dead, because they're very simple to understand. They're not trying to, move in 5 different directions at the same time in like multiple dimensions.
The other thing that I think is really fascinating about the similarities, which I don't think I've heard many people talk about, is like, and this is I feel like if anyone would understand, you would, because like you perceive things psychically. There's something about both of their signatures that is insect-like with both of them, and not necessarily in the way I can't.
Well, it's why like we end up drawing like almost caricatures of mantis faces in every case.
Yeah, but like the Fae are like that too in a way, but like it's usually like because there's something hive-like about both of them, and there's something like I think there's something like sound-wise also that's similar to the idea of like buzzing and like I don't know, I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something insect-like about both of them.
It's one of the places where you realize we don't have language for it. We don't have, and we're like doing the next best thing. And yeah, Fae are a little bit more like that trappings. They dress up a little bit more, and they make an effort to dress up a little bit more. But like underneath that, you realize that is something wholly other.
Well, and I was just thinking, like, like I was like, oh, but like we don't like perceive fairy and insect, and then it just came to me like their wings, like we portray them in like pop, as like insect wings.
Yeah, dragonflies, butterflies, ladybugs, all of it. Like, and that's one of those things where I always, when we have an unconscious default to describe something, that's always worth investigating. When people are talking about energy and they're like, oh, I don't believe in energy. And I'm like, have you talked about somebody not having good vibes? Have you talked about not having, like you walked into a room and it just didn't feel right? What are you talking about then? Like, what are you responding to? You're using that language for a reason. Your brain is trying to, convey a thing that doesn't have a good shape in the mental foundation you've been handed by your culture.
It's like everyone has said, like, I don't like that person. I don't know why. I just don't like that person.
Yeah.
That is totally.
Yeah. Something is telling you something. Pay attention to it, investigate it. might be that they simply remind you of like a step relative you had a really bad experience with,
Right.
but you won't know
Mhm.
you actually take the time to ask the questions of, rather than just sort of like, I don't know, walking through life and being like, I don't know, I don't like that, and just keep
Yeah.
that whole, I don't know,
But
sleepwalking thing just doesn't appeal to me.
it's still like the same sort of perception though. Like it's still like you need to explore, well, what is this subconscious thing coming forward, whether it's like trauma based
Yeah.
or it is like an actual like psychic hit. Because
Impression.
it's the same, it's the
Yeah.
same realm. And that's like,
Mhm.
No, it's so important. It's why I'll recommend to people who are learning from me, like, you also should probably be getting therapy during all of this stuff, because knowing like all of the differences in here and what you're carrying, all of us are carrying baggage, and your baggage does help to shape, for good or for bad,
Mhm.
various experiences and your interpretations thereof. And you may never be able to be fully rid of the baggage, but knowing how it changes your experience will make you a better witch, will make you a better magical user, will make you a better psychic.
and that's one of the reasons I'm so strong on like journaling, like just journaling, not even magical journaling or whatever, as well as meditation, because it's going to make you a stronger psychic for both those reasons, for both like understanding how your mind works so that you have a strong psychic symbol and you can start to interpret things, but then also so when you know when it's your own shit.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, like
Like,
this is the real undiscovered country. And until you navigate this and like really have a good sense of all of the pathways and byways, you're not going to be able to see like how it projects and reflects everything else going on around you.
Well, and that's why I love Carl Jung, and I think he's the most misunderstood person that I hear occultists totally like.
Everybody dogs on him now, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
but it's like if you read his shit, it's like, no, he was exploring the same thing. Like he even straight up says, like, under certain contexts, I can only just talk about these things through a psychological lens because that's the only way we can concretely discuss these experiences.
yeah.
But then he goes on to explain like that he doesn't believe that it's just in our head, but like he goes into this whole thing about like how we perceive everything in our heads. So like what is to say that just because it doesn't have a physical counterpart that it doesn't
Yeah,
exist?
no, I mean he had a spirit guide Philemon with the old man with heron's wings, who
Yes.
was and wasn't him at the same time. He had the spontaneous psychokinetic eruption where
Yes.
I mean there's
Well,
so
and what I love about that is so like I'm finding because I'm doing a deep dive into like Thelema and Crowley's writings, as well as Jung, as well as alchemy. And like that is their tide. Like they
Mhm.
both loved alchemy and they both loved like a Neoplatonic thought. And I'm finding Crowley and Jung are exploring the same thing with different languages, and even like Philemon with Jung, and then Eowas with
Mhm.
Crowley, and they had the same battle. They had the whole: Are you part of my subconscious or my higher self, or are you an external entity? And they go back and forth.
Yeah. The answer to that question is yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I
Hard yes on all
really
fronts.
feel like we all dip into this sort of like collective unconscious, and like everybody's coming up with the same alphabet soup, just it spells out slightly different things.
I
If
love that.
my thing to anybody who's just like "Rah, rah, rah, rah," Carl Jung is like, first of all, stop reading Richard Knoll. He's just mean. Find a copy of
Me.
Red Book.
Red Book, yes.
Don't worry about trying to chew your way through anything else, because Jung was brilliant, but also trying to like code switch and
Yes.
mask in the
Mhm.
language that was acceptable. Like there's a lot that it just becomes it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. You read the Red Book, that's where he's raw, and it's
Yes.
arguably his book of shadows.
Because he didn't think anyone was going to read it.
Yes.
Like it was for himself. Code switching is such a great way to put it. The way I usually put it is that like he talks in a circular manner to
Mhm.
where you have to kind of pay attention to like what he said about it here as well as here and here, because his audience is different in these 3 points. and how he's relating to the thing, but you can get a holistic idea of what like he's really trying to convey by keeping, because he even like one of the things people kind of overlook is like, well, why does he have his own definition of these psychological terms that everyone like that standardized that like Freud had, but he's like, oh yes, it is this thing, but here's my definition of it, because he's giving you the code, and you need to keep that in mind when he discusses it later, or else you're going to think he's just talking about the psyche.
Some of it's also understanding context. So, psychology was a very new discipline, and it was scrabbling for any kind of legitimacy and validity, and it was being treated and dismissed as like, just, oh, that's silly. There's a reason why Freud, actually, he published his like interpretation on dreams in 1899. He insisted that the date be post-dated to 1900 so that it was fully associated with the modern age.
Oh.
And he was very aware of basically what we'd call optics now. So there were things that he did and believed that he would not write about until many years later. So like, after he's no longer like scrabbling for renown and having to like pull things back and cover stuff up and basically mask. He's on record saying, if we are to see evidence of the paranormal, we will see it in dreams.
Oh,
but he
wow.
would never commit to that during his career and in any of his papers, because academia would have judged psychology at the time and just dismissed it as like one more aspect of spiritualism.
Right.
Like understanding the context is so important.
Yeah. And like, I don't know. I could go on and on about Carl Jung forever.
Also like just finding like how many of the folks in like the Golden Dawn and the early stuff are also psychoanalysts and
beyond
like,
Fortune
going on. Yeah, like Fortune was the one I was thinking about.
Yeah.
Miss Violet Mary Firth. I mean, she has her problems too. And
they
also there's of course they do. We're all people. We're messy. Yeah. If we're not messy, somebody's covered some shit up, or they whitewashed us, they straightwashed us, they've done something.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I love this conversation, although we are very much over. So we should wrap it up soon. Do you all have any last thoughts on anything, Jung or otherwise?
Keep your mind open and don't assume that anything you've been taught.
Tea with Balrogs.
Tea with Balrogs, apparently.
Tea with Balrogs.
Yes.
Woohoo! 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 All right.
Hey,
myself.
Congratulations.
Actually, who is the artist of the beautiful stuff behind you?
Okay, so this is I believe his name is Swartz. He goes by Skull Garden. So he did the Wooden Tarot. He is a queer artist. I believe he's trans actually. But does these beautiful like animal, like they're like otherworldly, like they feel like spirits, but they still feel like animals, and that's why I love them so much. Like I think I bought everything he's ever made, whether it's a deck or a print or what.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
Thank you. And then I got a big M in case I forget my name. The guys got this out of storage because the shop that they owned used to be called The Mystic Dream. Yeah. So the M was part of spelling The Mystic Dream. And I was just like, I want that. Like it'll go with my color scheme in my room. And it's, in case I forget my name.
Yeah.
Carries a little bit of the dream with you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Matt, it was really nice to meet you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Aurora Rose. And it was really just wonderful to think, to listen, to think. I was also thinking, but it was also, it was wonderful to listen to you two go back and forth about this. And I think that I've also taken notes on like integrating witchcraft more into future seasons. And I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff we can do.
Yeah, if you want to pull me and Devin on, we are game. So
all right.
And with technology, we can do stuff remotely. I've been really pushing so people like really understand that you don't have to physically be there, to have very legitimate, in some cases even more accurate perceptions. Because time, space, there's a reason they draw witches with brooms, but it's not necessarily that they're riding actual brooms.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Also, before we pop off, if you haven't pledged to the Kickstarter and you felt that this was a cool conversation and you want to see more queer people investigating the paranormal and you want to see just like cooler experiments that maybe you haven't seen on your television, then you should definitely, yes, give us a gift. Or like we said earlier, if you can't pledge, then just share it with your community. We love you for that in advance. That would be amazing. And help us make these shows reality. Help us make the paranormal queer again.